So in this video I wanted to talk about fields and how you set the values of fields and how you change values in fields. And I'm using the figures project from chapter 1. And I'm going to open up the circle class and we're going to look at the code here. Now I've taken out some of the documentation so that this won't look exactly like your project, but the actual source code will be the same. So anyway, here's the class definition for the circle class. And you notice we have our fields up here at the top. Okay, now notice that they're marked with the private access modifier. And what that means is that the fields cannot be changed unless you use a method that's defined in the class. Okay, so let me just go through the example here step by step and explain what's happening. When we create an object from the circle class, the very first thing that runs is the constructor. And this is true of all classes. And this is the constructor code that I'm highlighting here. What this code will do is we'll set the initial values for the fields. You notice it sets diameter to 100, x position to 230, and so on. Okay. Now once that's done, because the fields are marked private, you cannot change the values unless you use one of the methods. So let's say, for instance, we'd like to change the diameter field from 100 to some other value. We would have to search down through the source code and find a method that will do that. Now I've rearranged the source code and I moved the method that's responsible up to the top of the code so that we can see it easier. The method that you'd have to use to change the value of diameter is the change size method, because that's the only one defined in this class that will do it. Okay, if you wanted to change the color value, you would have to use a method that changes the color. And in this class, the method that they've set up to do that is called change color. Notice how the names of the methods are reflect what the method is going to do. Change size changes the size. Change color changes the color. Okay. So I want to show you how this works now. I'm going to close the source code window. I'm going to create an object of the circle class. Right click on the class definition, choose new circle. Now when I click OK, it's going to create an object and it's going to run the constructor. And the constructor is the method that will set all the values of the fields initially. Okay, so here's the object. It's been created. Now BlueJ has a really nice feature. If you right click on the object and choose the inspect option, you can actually see what the values are. And if you notice that this jives perfectly with what we saw in the source code, because the diameter field is 100, the x position is 230, and so on. Now I'll open up the source code again, and you can see that that's true. Let me move this over a little bit. There you go. Notice when we create the object, the constructor runs, and the very first thing it does sets the diameter to 100, and you can see that reflected over here. Sets the x position to 230, you can see that over here, and so on. Now let's say I want to change the value of the diameter to 50. Okay, I can't do it directly because it's marked private. So I have to run one of the methods. So the one I want to run is change size. Okay, so let's close the source code window. Now right click on the circle and let's call the change size method and put in a new value. So if I put 50 in here for the diameter, watch what happens. It happens real quick. You notice it's 100. Voila, it changes to 50. Okay, let's change the color from blue to another color. Right click on the object, choose a method that will do it. Now the only one that will do that in this class is the change color method. So type in a new color. Now remember, when you're dealing with strings, you have to enclose the value in quote marks. So for instance, if I want to change it to red, that's the proper way to do it. If I don't put the quote marks, I'm going to get an error. And I don't want to get an error, so I'm going to put the quote marks around. Click OK, and there you go. It changes from blue to red. Okay, now what do you think would happen if I create a brand new circle object? I'm going to leave this object alone, but I'm going to create a new circle object. Right click, new circle. Click OK, and here's our second object. Now what do you think the values of this object named circle2 are going to be for the fields? Well, let's use the inspector. Right click on the object, choose inspect, and notice the values are different, of course, than the original object that we were working with because we changed them. The reason that the diameter is 100 and the color is blue is because the constructor set those values to set those fields to those particular values, okay? Which is exactly what you'd expect. If you say wanted all of your new circle objects to have an initial diameter of 10, how would you do that? Well, what you do is you change the source code so that in the constructor here, you would simply change the value to 10. Let's try that, okay? Compile. Okay, create a new circle object. And now remember, initially the diameter was 100, but if I choose the inspector, it's going to be 10, okay?